Hi everyone, it's Lesley from Hungry Heffy Crafts and happy Mother's Day to all my UK mums out there. Today I've got two cards which is focusing on building up a background with your distress inks and also adding a little something with some stencils. I've got two cards, one for my mother and my mother-in-law, and I'm going to be using the My Favourite Things Bitty Bears, the MFT Little Letters, also a stamp set from Reverse Confetti called Heart-Filled Sentiments, and I've grabbed some border dies here as well. So to start off, I'm going to stamp this cutie patootie with heart. Isn't he so sweet? He is going to be taking the place of the letter U today, or O. I guess it depends on whether you say mom or mum, and I kind of say them both. I've stamped them using some Memento Tuxedo black ink onto some DCP, Clairefontaine DCP paper, and I'm using 2 or 3 colors of Copic markers. If you color a lot of bears, I recommend that you get the YR21. It's a great little color, and even if you just blend it out with your colorless blender, you can do a little tip to tip action here to bridge the gap between and to fade it out, blend it into the white areas, and it's it's a really good one. I like it a lot. And I like to then come in and add a little rosy cheek, and I had to use the R20 because the R11 was not doing it for me. So these are the little letters dies from MFT, and I'm going to be using them to build the word mum for my first card. So I'm also going to prep for my other card, and it's not going to say mum, it's going to say mumsy, because I call my mummy mumsy sometimes. So I'm going to run these through my desktop die cutting machine, and I get a lot of questions about this. This is from Tattered Lace, and the machine is called Baby Blue, and so far I'm pretty much in love with it. So I've die cut these letters, and I'm going to use my stamp as a guide to try and figure out where I want all my placements to be. I've decided that I want to have some embossing on my card just to add a little bit more interest, because it's pretty much, well, not quite a one layer card, but it's pretty simple in some respects, so a little bit of interest I think would be good. So I'm using these border dies. Now I'm actually not going to cut through using, I don't want to run it through my machine and cut the card. So I'm going to be using my tan embossing mat. If you've not seen these, you can certainly look them up. They are like a rubbery kind of consistency, and you put this behind your card as you run it through your machine, and because there's that give, I guess, of the rubber, the blade doesn't cut, but instead you're left with an indentation, an embossed area, I guess. So I have this beautiful embossing, and I think my Big Shot was on the wrong setting because it's almost too deep. So I'm using my bone folder just to try and smooth some of that out, because I don't want to have the unsightly areas of the edge of the die. I just want the actual impression of where the blade was. And I'll do the same for the bottom section underneath the word mom here, using my craft mat as a guide so I can get that straight. Now that I have both of these embossed lines on here, I'm going to be able to start my masking and inking, but there was a couple of smudges, so I took my sand eraser to get rid of those smudges there. It's a great little tool. It's called the Mono Sand Eraser, and very often if you drop your ink pad or have a little smudge on it, you can get rid of it with your sand eraser. I've put down some masking tape, it's like post-it note tape, over the areas that I have that lovely embossing onto my card. And now I'm using a Simon Says Stamp stencil, it's hard to say, Simon Says Stamp stencil, with my picked raspberry distressing and a little mini blending foam here to blend some ink onto this. Don't forget to clean it up. And now I'm going to come in with dried marigold. So I'm using 3 colors for all my cards today. The picked raspberry, which is the pink, the dried marigold, and then some squeezed lemonade. And for this one, I'm going pretty heavy-handed along the masking paper or the post-it note paper. And that means that I get a real pop of color whenever I pull back the mask. Once I have some of that orange tones in there, I'm going to come in now with my squeezed lemonade and add some of that along the top and also to the bottom section, just underneath where I have my orange tones. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take my distress sprayer with some clean water, spray into my hand, and then shake it over my project. By putting it into my hand and then shaking it over the top, it gives me a lot more control. I like to kind of have a bit more control of where those big splatters go. Now for the big reveal, it's always my favourite bit. I love it. Now, because this guy bled at the bottom, I decided to do something I haven't done in a long time, which is some paper piecing. So I'm cutting right along this stamped line here. And I'll do the same to the little bear when I get around to cutting him out. But the reason that I'm cutting this one out is I'm going to bring in that same tone of pink ink that I used for the hearts to colour, the same tone of pink ink that I use for my heart stencils to colour this heart here. And I'll also use them to colour the rest of the letters in the word mum for my project. So I'm tapping my sponge dauber here, my blending tool, onto my picked raspberry distress ink pad, and then simply pouncing it up and down onto the letters to get a nice coverage. And the more that you pounce, the darker it becomes. So here I am cutting out this other little guy, and once I have them all cut out, I'm going to darken up the edges using a brush marker. And I'm using the Memento black one, which matches the ink I've used. And I'm holding the cut out stamped image in my left hand and then having my brush on the right hand and running the side of the nib along that edge. And this, I would always recommend that you hold it this way with the stamped side away from the pen, because that way if your pen slips, it will actually make a mark on the reverse of your image and not ruin the little stamping and colouring that you've already done. I'll do the same to my heart, and then I can stick that right on top, and because I've covered the edges, it creates kind of like a seamless transition between the two of them. It's not as obvious that they are two pieces stuck together. Now I'm going to stick down the word mom, and I use my glue pen on the back of each of these elements because it has a nice fine nib to it, so it's handy for those skinny letters. And I wanted to add a sentiment to this bottom section. So this is from a reverse confetti set. This is actually my first reverse confetti set, and I got it from Jen at Creativation, so thank you, Jen. This has got a gorgeous font to it. The set is called Heart-Filled Sentiments, and I'm using my Misty to stamp this onto my card. Now I've picked out a pink ink which kind of matches the pinks that I've been using. It's a dye ink from Altenew, because although distress inks are fabulous for creating backgrounds and a lot of other techniques, they don't stamp wonderfully. So I'm using a dye ink for that. And when I stamped it, I realized it was actually a little bit too dark. So to mask that kind of and add a little extra to the card, I am inking my stamp again with some clear embossing ink, and then using some holographic embossing powder right over the top, and that means that it's not as noticeable now. It seems more intentional that the sentiment below is a darker color of pink. I'm sure you wouldn't really notice, to be fair, it's just me being persnickety. but it gives a beautiful sheen to this card. Now for my second card, I decided to skip the whole embossing element and instead just kind of do something a little bit different. So I'm masking it off again in a similar area, but this time I'm starting with some of the yellow inks and blending it out with the orange. It really doesn't really matter whether you start with a light color or a dark color, but you can find whatever kind of suits your groove. Once I've got my orange and the yellow on there, I'm going to bring some pink into this card on the background. I didn't do that for the first one, but I'm adding some of that picked raspberry pink to each of the 4 kind of corners of my card. And then I'll come in again with a little bit more yellow at this bottom section because at the moment it's very stark white. Of course, I gotta splatter it once again to get that distressed look. And then this time I'm using a stencil from Winnie and Walter to add some pink stars onto my project. Now, I give this a quick blast with my heat tool and rubbed it with my Embossing Buddy powder tool. And very quickly cleaned off my stencil because I'm going to use it once again to line up over my inked stars. And then I'll tap my clear embossing ink over the stencil, and that will mean that I will get the embossing ink in the areas where I have my pink stars. So I can add my holographic embossing powder over the top and give each of these stars a beautiful shiny sheen. Isn't it pretty? And reveal. And for this one I decided just to use my Copics to colour in the heart, and I did once again cut it right along the edge, right along the stamp line, and then went round the edges with my Memento brush marker and inked up my letters in exactly the same way. But now for actually aligning the letters on this one, because it was a longer word, it was actually a bit harder. So I'm using my Misty and the creative corners that I got for Christmas, and this like acrylic L shape is wonderful for a guide to help me line these up perfectly straight, and then I can use my glue pen once again to stick them all in place. For my mumsy, I had a lot of white space around my sentiment in the middle there, so I used my trimmer to cut 2 skinny strips of pink cardstock, and I'm sticking these on the top and the bottom just to kind of frame my sentiment on the front of the card. And to give this card a little bit more of a pizzazz, I'm going to take my glossy accents and give the heart that the bear is holding a nice thick layer of that glossy accents, and then sprinkle over some ultra fine glitter over the top. And of course now I have to set it to the side and try not to put my finger in it until it dries. So there we go, we've got 2 cards, 2 different results, same color palette, same kind of techniques, but 2 different cards for 2 wonderfully different people. And happy Mother's Day to everyone out there who is celebrating today. I know in some parts of the world it's actually in another few weeks or so. But happy Mother's Day, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching this video. Here's some more videos that you may like. If you haven't already, please subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any of my other videos as soon as they're released. You can also leave me a like and a comment down here, and don't forget to follow me on social media @HungryHeffy. I'll see you there. Have a great day and happy crafting. Bye!